Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air, where we explore innovative strategies for personal and professional growth. I'm your host, Jeff Brown, and in today's episode, we discuss universal design and its impact on training in hybrid work environments. We'll discuss how universal design principles create inclusive and effective learning experiences by making materials accessible to all, regardless of ability or learning preferences. Joining us today is Dr. Charles Dye, an expert in universal design, who will share insights on overcoming challenges, enhancing inclusivity, and creating accessibility in multicultural learning environments. So let's get started. Charles, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Dr. Chip Dye. I'm the lead researcher here at InSync, and today I want to talk a little bit about universal design. Many of you may have heard the term before. I want to talk a little bit about its background, how it applies to the ever-changing landscape of learning and development in industry, and then talk about some specific applications in industry that I'm seeing emerging that may be of interest to you. When we talk about universal design, it's important to understand where it came from. In the mid to late 70s, there was a big pushback against urban design that was essentially designed for the car and not for people. We see that today in walkable cities initiatives and that kind of thing. But back then, it was a real problem just walking from point to point in the downtown major metropolitan district. So a group of architects got together and they put out a set of guidelines that they called universal design. And it was designed to allow people with different capabilities, some with some kind of limitation or requirement, like perhaps a wheelchair or a cane, but also sight limited or maybe not the fastest people on their feet. And the design elements were meant to allow everyone to freely use the downtown. And then it got conferred onto building design to let everyone get to the front door and to get to the elevator, and then to use the elevator. And roughly 25 years later, two researchers working for the Center for Applied Special Technologies, known as CAST, took those concepts and applied it to learning and development. CAST's big background was directed at learners that had special needs or requirements to participate in the learning experience, mostly in the primary, secondary, and post-secondary world, rather than industry or government. But those initiatives were based on things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 508, that some of you may be familiar with, or more globally, the WAI initiative, which meant to give learning some ability to be accessed by those with specific needs that may not allow them to otherwise. What's interesting about this is if we take a step back from Section 508 and checklists and things like that, and think about the 7 precepts of universal design, which have to do with ease of access and usability by everyone. And we think in the context of learning and development and instructional delivery, it should come as no surprise that with the advent of things like hybrid work, virtual learning, and all the different ways we can deliver instructional content to a learner, that it would be a nice thing if we could make it work for all learners rather than just the initial group we're designing for. So universal design as a theoretical framework is designed around these 7 principles, but really what it's meant to do is if we get out of those 7 principles and away from checklists and requirements, we think about how to deliver to individual learners, and that regardless of their individual capabilities. And we'll talk a little bit about why those design elements are important and what benefits you'll reap from them. So today, universal design is used in learning implementations that address multiple learning environments, multiple different audiences, and if used properly, is part of the systematic approach to design and development. The key benefits of universal design The key benefits of universal design really revolve around the ability to deliver consistent and effective training to all members of your learning audience. If we think about why we conduct training, if an organization, convenes and implements a training implementation, it's because they have an organizational goal they're trying to accomplish. If we don't deliver effectively to our entire training audience, we are less likely to be successful in obtaining that organizational objective. So the big benefit is that everyone can get the training they need to out of it. Applying universal design principles is really not something any of you haven't done before if you're a designer or you've worked in implementation and delivery, because what most people think of as quote unquote good training practices, introducing yourself, establishing some psychological safety, establishing protocols about how to interact with one another, mutual respect, and those kinds of things. Those are all elements that easily fall into a much more broad framework of how to implement universal design. And when we think about delivering training to multiple learning environments, whether it be hybrid, virtual, in-person, or self-paced, or one of the other dozen or so that probably exist today, when we move forward into implementing in that delivery environment, we need to think in universal design concepts about how to take what we've built and repurpose it in such a way that it would be accessible for others that may not be able to take advantage of that learning. As an example, if someone doesn't have access to high bandwidth, maybe interactive live virtual is not an option for them. But if I do a recording and I build the appropriate support assets, that might be downloadable and accessible in a different way. So this isn't just about repurposing and making everything very easy and addressable for those with limitations, but more about building that staircase or ramp that everyone can use. The common challenges when trying to implement universal design are largely around inability to articulate what you're trying to accomplish. In fact, there's a study that was done in 2007, about 6 years after universal design really became something that Rosenmeyer had implemented for learning and development. And it took a group of about 1,000 instructors working in primary, secondary, post-secondary, and industry, and said, what is universal design? And got very limited feedback. Some people took a shot and missed. Some people had no idea what they were talking about. Few people had a handle on it, but they got asked a bunch of pointed questions around what it meant to design for you to using or implement training and deliver training that leverage universal design. And of course, those people couldn't answer those questions very well. But when they got asked probing questions about what it meant to include someone with a particular disability, perhaps they're limited sight or hard of hearing or colorblind, or they don't have access to technology, or they might not speak English, they might not be illiterate. There's a whole variety of things that teachers every day address. Of course, those educators had a raft of methodologies and techniques and things to do to address particular needs of a learner within a learning environment. Well, in fact, that's universal design. So once they started unpacking those techniques and strategies and put them and organized them in a framework that they called universal design, those same instructors became statistically much more effective at designing instructional experiences that were accessible out of the gate. In other words, they didn't have to change their instruction when someone with a specific need showed up in the audience. They had already anticipated it because they had thought about these things in advance. The good news for those of you that are thinking about implementing universal design is that there are a lot of assets out there to help. A lot of research has been done on how to address particular needs. And this is not about changing or making content much more complex or more expensive. It doesn't have to start that way. You can take something and, for example, build a script on it and caption it. And now, if someone doesn't speak English, there are engines out there that will translate captions on the fly and display in their language a delivery that's being provided either live or on a recording. What a great tool. Now you don't even have to go through the effort of regionalizing. And I'm not saying that that's not worth doing. It is, of course, a great thing to do when you have the opportunity. But sometimes we don't anticipate that for our training. So if we just take those design elements and implement them early, and as part of the design process, start small, see what works, and then you can collect some feedback and identify different things you can do as part of your design process that don't have to cost any more. The other big resistance to UD that you'll see a lot, universal design, is people say, well, we haven't done universal design for 4 decades and we need to do it now. Okay, that's great. And if that works for you, more power to you. But I'm here to tell you, all your competition is going to be out there building instructional experiences, building work experiences that are accessible by a broader audience than the ones you're delivering to. And ultimately, it boils down to a strategic advantage for the organizations that do that. If we think about an organization that, for example, only took men into their ranks, and my background was as a submarine officer in the United States Nuclear Navy. For a long time, nuclear submarines were crewed only by men. And it didn't take too long, roughly 45 years, for the submarine force to figure out that half of the population was being excluded out of the gate for screening into a very arduous and technically demanding job. So wouldn't it be great if we could figure out how to bring those people into the fold and broaden our scope from which to recruit? Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about here with universal design. You want to broaden your access, your population of interest, to everyone that could benefit from your training and implementation. If you do that, you address things like multiculturalism, literacy challenges, physical and cognitive impairment issues. All of those can get addressed by an appropriate design. And I'm not saying it's easy. You have to get creative. But as I said at the beginning of this, there are some great resources when tackling a particular issue. How do I deal with site limited in this context? And there are great tools out there to help you in your design and implementation. Some great applications that are currently going on here at InSync and in other places are accessibility with respect to STEM education. CAST, the organization that kind of fronted the universal design effort in the early aughts, has something called the Coordinate Initiative. And it is meant to provide instruction on basic STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics topics using a variety of different implementation methods and visualization technology and different instructional techniques and strategies to enhance STEM instruction in secondary education. That program has been around for several years now and is wildly successful. It teaches mathematical concepts using visuals that perhaps you learned by rote memorization. And the research is very clear. If you build material that is more accessible to any given learner, their likelihood to engage with the material goes up dramatically on the order of 2 standard deviations. If we think about our instructional model for engagement and the elements of learner engagement, the big challenges for them will be intellectual and environmental engagement. And in that context, Using universal design obviates a lot of the challenges in the environment, and it also makes more challenging topics simpler for them to approach if you give them different ways to approach it, whether it be visual or tactile, puzzle solving, problem-based learning, so that they can take those concepts and apply them in a meaningful way. I got asked to put this topic together about universal design because of the advent of the hybrid learning environment. Now, what's interesting about universal design is if we kind of turn it around on itself and we think about learning environments as just another learning, then a universal design approach would allow you to build content that could be effectively delivered, whether it be face-to-face, hybrid, or all virtual, or self-paced, or by correspondence. The idea is that while the learning experience moment to moment may not be identical, in fact, it won't be, what you do want to accomplish is a meaningful and equivalent, consistently excellent instructional experience. And if you do that in the design phase of training delivery, then you actually reduce your overall cost for design and delivery because you've built something that can be used across multiple learning environments. So if we think in that way about hybrid, and we think about the unique challenges hybrid poses to an instructional delivery, if we design anticipating those as part of our design approach in universal design implementation, then you have an excellent chance of being able to deliver effectively with it. If you look at our research report about hybrid design, a vast majority of training that's being delivered to hybrid audiences right now is not designed for them. It's designed for either all in-person or all virtual. And as a consequence, those learners are being disserved. And you produce uneven learning outcomes, which is kind of negative outcome for the organization. There are a couple other benefits I think that need to be articulated about universal design, particularly for the instructional design and implementation team. If you approach universal design as a implementation guideline and requirement, then what you will find is that you will anticipate the requirements of learners before they occur. It will enhance the cultural competence of an instructional team when you make them think about delivering to people where English might be a second language or perhaps literacy is a challenge. And as a consequence, their instructional delivery will be more complete and it will be more structured. And as a consequence, appear more professional. So in conclusion, what I'd like to leave you with is that universal design is not as hard as you might think it is. And it's a powerful framework that will allow you to build inclusive, accessible training for your entire current and future workforce in a variety of learning environments with one design effort. You have an opportunity to establish an organizational advantage by implementing universal design in your training. And as the learning landscape continues to evolve with the inclusion of prescriptive training dictated by artificial intelligence and culturally competent learning experiences in multiple regions, you'll find that universal design is even more important than it was even 5 years ago. Universal design isn't just about making commitment to accessibility. It will provide you a strategic advantage, and I encourage you to take the first steps down that road, which might include just basic captioning or some simple change, and then ask your learners what works for them. You'll find that you'll be able to reap some very serious benefits for your training implementations. And I wish you all the best of luck. Jeff, thanks very much.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.